The elixir to growth for any company or any organization is rapid, empirically backed experimentation. Whoever's listening to this, if you really believe you've got a niche that brands aren't addressing and you can provide that as a service and as a unique IP, go give it away for free to a bunch of brands. You'd be shocked to see how many of them will immediately want to pay you if it's actually that good.
Welcome to the Deep Specialization podcast, the show where we blend focus, strategy, and client intimacy in order to scale and simplify our businesses and our lives. I'm your host, Corey Quinn. Let's jump into the show. Today on the Deep Specialization podcast, I'm excited to welcome Ned McPherson. He's the Chief Growth Officer of Power Digital, a 820 employee digital agency. He's also the founder of Endrock Growth and Analytics, a firm he grew to 120 employees before selling it to a PE firm in December of 2023. I can't wait to hear his story. Welcome, Ned.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start with way back when you were involved in your company, Endrock. About when did you start that company?
So the agency was January 2019. Technically, I had started the LLC, to be technical, earlier in there, about 3 years before that. Now, the reason why is it created a little LLC infrastructure to do some consulting on the side for businesses to make sense of their analytics stacks. A lot of these were direct-to-consumer brands who had things like Google Analytics hooked up, candidly never looked at it, never inferred insight from their data. For the very few who did, they didn't really know what to do with it. Like, how do you transition this just mess of reporting into something, actionable strategy? And I had a knack for that. So I started helping brands kind of understand what their data meant, start to ideate around hypotheses, start to drive changes, start to drive experiments, et cetera, all things business growth relating to what their data had suggested. So that became a little bit of my kind of offering out there in the marketplace. And I ended up aligning with about 6 or 7 different brands where I was kind of like their de facto head of experimentation, if you will, as an outsourced individual. And so I did that for them for a few years. And then I just kept getting more and more demand and more companies asking. I was like, I can't do all of this myself. I tried to take on more and it was just really challenging. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to pivot the whole company and I'm going to go create an agency. So that's where I created Endrock Growth and Analytics. And that was an agency in 2019, started literally kind of like Jan 2, 2019. And yeah, we grew really fast and scaled up to about 120 people by 2023. And we were acquired. So we kind of went into due diligence there in September of 23 and then completed the acquisition on December 4th of 23 to private equity backed strategic.
Okay. So there's a lot to unpack there. And by the way, you started the acquisition process in September. You wrapped it up by December. That's amazing. It feels very quick.
It was quick. It was efficient, quick-ish. I mean, it's anyone who's gone through an acquisition knows due diligence is really intense, right? It really is.
Of course.
Because on top of the fact that, you are answering myriad of different stakeholders as to insurance questions, finance questions, projections, legal, I mean, everything you can imagine, every single corner and every little granny of the business, you're answering questions around. You're also trying to run the business and maintain growth because
and the value, right?
If you take your eye off the ball too much, you're going to end up getting retraded or something. So, it is a really intense window, but nonetheless, it was relatively quite efficient. And so, we were able to button it up and almost exactly 3 months to the day.
Well, that's pretty awesome. I imagine. So I'm gathering your Endrock was focused on analytics and growth and analytics, but obviously you are a numbers, systems, process guy, I'm assuming, which is probably served you in that acquisition. And you had a lot of your things buttoned up. But in any event, let's start with, so Endrock was something you had started in 2016. Was it like a side hustle type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, kind of. Exactly. I was running another company at the time and we were having moderate success. A couple business partners of, were friends of mine had started a little business here in South Florida and we were doing okay. We were scaling, just, we made a ton of mistakes, to be honest. It's just early, young business owners, to be honest, but we had some success. We were able to build that company up a bit, a couple $1 million company and it was scaling, but kind of on the side, Canada was in these different CEO groups, and I used to listen to some of the challenges people had, and I would opine on what I thought they could do, and they seemed to really enjoy and resonate with some of my recommendations. And a lot of those were built around me just saying like, hey, let me look under the hood. Let me see what's going on. Show me just send me your analytics access. Let me look. And then I'd come back and give them all these strategies, and they'd be like, "Oh, that was so helpful, and we really enjoyed it, or we implemented, we saw an immediate change," whatever they would say.
Yeah.
So, I kind of saw the writing on the wall, and it was one of those classics where I started to like consult on the side, small little couple K contract type of thing. Then I started to get another one, then I started to get another one, et cetera. And those started to scale up over time. And I had started some other ventures in that meantime too that I was working on full time, but it was one of those that like no matter where I went, I kept getting pulled back in this direction
Yeah.
because people just it was
Yeah.
like all the money. People just kept wanting to pay me for this next thing, and they were like,
Sure.
"We heard you're the guy to do this. Can you come do it for us?" And so eventually I just was like, you know what, this is really where I need to spend my time and focus. Yeah.
So the initial 6 to 7 brands came through that CEO group effectively?
Yes, exactly. Well, that was where client one came from, who's still with me today, by
Oh,
the way.
wow.
Yeah, so I was helping them along the side for now going on 9 years, right? And this was long before I like created the structure of the agency in a real company. It was
Yeah.
me just trading some of my time for money and such or in the early days, but again, is really, really scaled up. So
And so in 2019, you started officially the agency. What was the service you were providing? Like, what was like, how did you characterize that specialization?
yeah, industry specific, it's called conversion rate optimization, which is exactly what it sounds like. You've got a lot of websites out there, you've got mobile web applications, you've got B2B brands that are trying to drive lead generation or form submits or whatever it is. And we spend a lot of time in the digital space talking about acquisition strategies. How do we find more traffic? How do we find cheaper traffic? How do we find fill in the blank, right? What we don't talk a lot about is, well, is the environment in which that traffic lands optimized to convert them to whatever it is that we're trying to convert them into, as an example. So that might
Sure.
be a sale, like on an e-commerce site. It might be an email submission, I'd be a form submission, a requested demo, a download an app, whatever. And so my whole career and what I focus on are the heuristics, the analytics, and the behavioral psychology that goes into taking a landing page or a website or a mobile app and getting it to convert better. That's it. It's like the
Sure.
other side of the coin to acquisition.
Yep.
And part of, why it works so well is not just the least of which you create immediate lifts in conversion rate, which often means just more contributed revenue to the brand, but it also has this beautiful halo effect that impacts all the top of funnel channels. Because if your conversion rate goes up, that means your return on ad spend or your incrementality or for like paid media goes up or your
Yeah.
CPAs go down. So you can open
Yeah.
the aperture and go target more users. So it
Yep.
has this beautiful like rising of the tide lifts all ships kind of effect, right? So because
Yeah.
of that, we had a lot of great kind of partnerships over the years with different paid social media agencies, SEO agencies, SEM, email, you name it, because we were a great like add-on to a lot of the
Yep.
work that we're doing with clients. But
Yep.
yeah, conversion rate optimization is technically it.
I'm very familiar with when I was at an agency after I left business school. We sold PPC and SEO to large enterprise brands,
Yeah,
a lot of e-com, and that was one of the services we bolted on. Probably not nearly as sophisticated as an approach as you did, but it was very simple. A/B testing back in the day,
yeah,
quite a few years ago. But
sure. Yeah.
so so the focus was of your specialization was in conversion rate optimization. Did you target any specific industries with that, or was it kind of any business that has a conversion rate challenge or is facing those you would work with?
Yeah, technically any business that has a digital conversion event, right? So again, it could be
Okay.
a form submit. We have a number of B2B clients, could be lead generation, an app download. But that being said, the majority of clients where we've had the most success and where we've just magnetically pulled in the most amount of leads and success stories over the years is e-commerce, right? So we've got a
Okay.
lot, hundreds and hundreds of e-commerce clients, right? So classic, beauty brand, fashion brand, accessories brand, CPG brand, what have you, that's selling an item or usually many items, right? Collections of
Sure.
items online. And they've got landing pages, home pages, navigation architecture, cart infrastructure, interstitials, product pages, collection pages, checkout pages, post checkout. All of these play into the consumer
Yeah.
psychology, right? And you can affect change based on what and how you say things on those pages. That's where we're really dangerous, is to be able to increase, the lifts for brands there.
And as you were growing the agency at this point, did you expand into sort of complementary services like acquisition type of services, or was it exclusively just doing the analytics and the sort of the testing?
Yeah, that the shiny thing was there. I can't tell you how many clients would like, "We love working with you all. Could we give you our paid media?" And we were just like, "It's
Right.
not our thing. Like, we don't do acquisition." So we turned down most of that, with the
Wow.
exception
It's
of
good.
we did have a development division just because there's a lot of development and design work that goes into launching
Sure.
A/B tests. So naturally, we did take on quite a bit of development work with clients. And then, of course, we're pretty sharp on the analytics front, so we would take on some analytics contracts. But no, every time they would push it, on email, taking over email or SEM or paid media, we would say no to all of those. And ultimately in the long run, I think that was the right move. We stayed very centric and we grew really
Yeah.
fast. And obviously, others saw a lot of value in us, hence the acquisition. And I'm
Sure.
super happy to say it wasn't just up to the acquisition. We were actually the fastest growing division within the acquiring Power Digital within our acquire last year. So in 2024, to prove the thesis out of their acquisition, I mean, we doubled. So.
Yeah. So you started again going back to 2019. I'm just curious on sort of the growth journey. Who was the first employee that you hired?
That was a developer. Yeah, so hired
Okay.
a developer. I mean, I couldn't do much without a developer, right? So I had worked with him on a few different projects in 2018 and then was like, "Hey, I'd love to bring you on full time." So brought him on full time and we started working on projects and no kidding, 2.5, 3 weeks later, I was like, "We need another developer." And he was like, "I got a friend I could bring in." I was like, "Great." I was like,
Amazing.
and I was like, "We need a designer." He's like, "One of my childhood best friends, an award-winning UI UX designer." And to this day, Mige, our designer, is still my head of design, has been for 6 years now. And really fun. Then after that, I was like, "We need an account manager." And he was like, "Well, my other friend's little sister is looking for a job." And so we hired Nash. Nash started as a junior account manager, made her way
Mhm.
through to become our head of basically our senior account manager, then became a growth lead, which is a more senior position, then head of growth leads. And she's actually the head of the whole department now. Now that I'm CGO for Power, she took over and runs the entire 160 person, 200 something client CRO department. So really fun
Wow.
story there. She started with kind of green in the industry and just,
Sure.
she's so intensely talented that was able to grow into that role in, relatively short amount of time when you think about it.
It's so all these sort of serendipitous moments. It's like it's meant this whole thing was meant to be on some
A lot of
level.
product market fit. Yeah. I mean, my
Yeah.
favorite line to describe that is they said, if you don't have product market fit, it feels like you're
Yeah.
pushing a boulder up a hill. If you do have
Yeah.
it, it feels like you're chasing one down a hill.
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
like, that's the best description of product market fit I've ever heard. From like
Yeah. Absolutely.
January 2nd, 2019 until even today, it feels like we're just constantly chasing to keep up with demand and to constantly make our product better, et cetera. And that's product market fit. Yeah.
Have you ever, or do you employ salespeople for the division, but for Enrock?
No, we never had any sales, never had any marketing. It was 100% referral and organic growth over the years.
Yeah.
I still to this day do all of the sales, if you will, which is
Sure.
as leads and interests come in. Candidly, I've done really the same thing from day one, which is let me on a complimentary basis do an audit for you. I'll take a look under the hood. I'll look at your end just like I did all the way back in 20. It's much better now, but I did back in
Sure.
2016, 17, and 18. I look under the hood. I do a full diagnostic of their analytics. I find immediate data points that we could optimize, pull some ideas out, give them an idea of how we think, how we operate, the types of ideas that we have. And that's complimentary for any brand that's interested. And that's,
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in trying to add as much value as I can up front before we get
Sure.
into discussions around an engagement. And that's done well for us and paid us dividends handsomely over the years. So.
So you mentioned 100% organically driven growth through referrals and whatnot. What had to be true at your business, at your agency, to generate that kind of growth? Like again, the referral based specifically. What are some key lessons learned potentially around client retention and satisfaction?
Yeah, a couple things there. One, fundamentally, does the product and service work? Like candidly, did we actually drive lift? I mean, we've had a few brands that just had, crazy success stories, right? So certainly that's probably arguably number one. I would say a close second to that is even for brands that worked with us, right? That would say, hey, we enjoyed working together, but it's not for us after 6 months, 12 months, whatever it was, we usually would get very warm responses. They'd be like, your team is super responsive and on the ball all the time. We just, for whatever reason, they were in housing, or there could be a variety of reasons why they didn't want to proceed
Sure.
any further. So, very often, I would continue to get referrals and leads, even from some of, we didn't have much churn, but from some of the clients who did churn. So that to me was
Sure.
always a hallmark that it was, yes, the quality of our service, but also, I mean, we were, just a very responsive and very, I would say, organized team, right? And so we were always on it. And that's just a testament, candidly, to some of the amazing people I was able to hire over the years and retain to this day. And they're, really the engine that made this all work.
What does responsive mean in this context? Like, what does responsive look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to sound really basic, but just like time to reply, I mean, I had big rules of my team that it's like, don't go to bed any night without clearing your inbox, right? That was one of my
Yeah.
favorite lines. I think it was Sam Walton had his like clearing his desk
Yeah.
theory, right? The founder of Walmart, where
Yeah.
obviously
Of course.
pre-internet, he would never leave the office apparently. And I may be butchering, maybe it wasn't him, but I think it was.
Yeah.
He would never leave the office until his desk was cleared of all the messages and letters and notes from the day, right? And that was just a basic principle. And I started to incorporate that. I mean, this is really rudimentary stuff, but candidly, I can't tell you in the early days when we were 3 employees, 5 employees, 7 employees, where we would win deals going up against big agencies, right? And the client would tell me straight up, they'd be like, we know you're not the most experienced, you're the most responsive during the pitching process, and you seem to want it the most. That's what they would say. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, does that mean that like replying to your emails every day actually won you business? It's like, yeah, kind of, and like that actually compounded and translated into some
Yeah.
tremendous growth. So,
Yeah.
that's part of it. And then also, oftentimes we're running experiments on sites, right? So we're changing things and we're implementing and affecting different change. So if a client's having a bad day with revenue, as an example, oftentimes they're really nervous when the day started, like, oh my God, revenue's really down. Is it this test? Should we stop the test? And so it's like you've got to be really responsive there. You've got to address it, right? Not the least of
Yeah.
which is maybe there is an issue with the experiment, right? Maybe it didn't pass QC parameters. Really, to be honest, 95% of the time, it's just some exogenous variable that's impacting. And maybe revenue's just not great that day. And so being able to dig in immediately, being like, here's what I found, here's what the
Yep.
data's showing. I
So
think if we
important.
give it till noon, or,
Yeah.
here's why I don't think we have to be worried, et cetera. And that shows the client that you care, right? And you're just as passionate about the results as they are.
You also mentioned being organized. What does that mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Which, we're launching 4 to 7-ish experiments per month per client across hundreds of clients. That's a lot of commits in a month. So oftentimes clients, they're running businesses, right? I mean, you've run a company before, I've run companies before, and it's like you got a million things on your mind. They're not going to remember what test we necessarily declared as a winner three
Right.
weeks ago. And so a lot of times clients come to us and be like, wait, why did we push that change live on the site? Sometimes they'll be like, I don't like it. Like, why is that there again? It's like, great question. Here's why. 3.5 weeks ago, we had just concluded this test. Here's a reminder, slide
Yeah.
17 on the deck. Here's the stat sig markers. Here's the confidence intervals, et cetera. Here was the projected lift on it. We all discussed, decided, yep, that's an absolute win. So we hard coded it. So, just being able to answer those questions quickly in an
Yeah.
organized fashion with supporting evidence and data to back it is key to addressing anybody, whether it's client or internal stakeholders' concerns.
That's beautiful. So, curious if you have any advice for maybe someone who is considering specializing in a service area, such as conversion rate optimization. What's the best way to do that? And how do they know they're making the right moves?
Yeah, sure. And keep a very keen eye in the early days on product market fit, right? Which is probably the best way to look at that is, are any of the folks that you're providing this service for telling others? Are they saying things like, oh, my, friend Jane's company would really do well from this, right? Or you should talk to John over here. Are they saying anything like that? It's a dead giveaway.
Yeah.
Another good way to look at it is, and this is a big one for me, I had taken some lessons from a guy who built a bunch of different internet courses a long time ago. He's really well known in the industry, and so I did a course with him. This was, I mean, before I started anything with him. It was like 2014 timeframe, and he had told me something super profound, which is he said he truly believed his paid course or whatever that he was selling was the best in the world for what it was selling, like how to do this
Yeah.
thing. He said the second best one out there is the one I give away for free. And so that really imparted on me, which is to the degree of which you can provide tremendous value for free upfront
Yeah.
will
Yeah.
I mean, put rocket boosters on your growth. So if you really believe, whoever's listening to this, if you really believe you've got a niche that brands aren't addressing and you can provide that as a service and as a unique IP, go give it away for free to a bunch of brands. You'd be shocked to see how many of them will immediately want to pay you if it's actually that good.
Yeah.
And so a good litmus test of this is make your free offerings so good that really sharp teams, like the top 2%, shouldn't need to hire you. They should be able to take what you provided them and go figure it out
Execute.
themselves.
Yeah.
And that's where that candidly, that's it. And I know a lot of people will be like, oh, you should never give it away for free. Give it away for free. Trust me. And that'll be an immediate way that you're going to learn, do you have value, et cetera. And you'll learn a lot in that free process, those free
Yeah.
I do audits, right? Those free audits, those complimentary services, whatever it is. And obviously that's hard. You spend a lot of time and work doing that, but that's what I would recommend.
Hey, it's Corey. After scaling an agency from 20 million to 150 million, I've discovered something profound. The most successful agencies aren't trying to serve everyone. They dominate one specific vertical market. I've created the Deep Specialization Accelerator, a 90-day group program that transforms generalist agencies into sought-after vertical market specialists. Using the proven system from my best-selling book, Anyone, Not Everyone, we will help you to, number one, choose the perfect vertical market for you if you don't already have one. Number two, build trust and authority in the vertical. Number three, create a predictable revenue growth plan so you can dominate the market with certainty. Join other ambitious agency founders ready to escape the generalist trap. We start in early March and only 12 spots are available to ensure you have an amazing experience. Visit CoreyQuinn.com/DSA. That's CoreyQuinn.com/DSA to learn more about the next cohort that's starting soon. Now back to the show. You said mind the nickels and dimes and the dollars will take care of themselves. What does
Yeah.
that mean?
I was yeah, so early in my career with some of those other companies, like you hear the story all the time. We would get airspeed and altitude, and then we'd come down, and I can't tell you how many times, either me individually or with the company, we were just like right there on the edge of being going under, right? And so I just became just manic over the years about watching every single dollar, to the point where I literally had a manual daily ledger until the day I sold Endrock. Even when we were, doing many millions in revenue, every morning, the first thing I would do, Monday through Friday when the banks were open, is I would do a manual account of all the bank accounts. Every dollar that went in, every dollar that went out, and everything was labeled, all in spreadsheets and all backed up. And so I knew, and if there was anything ever off, my poor bookkeeper, I used to pull her in all the time and ask all these questions. She was, I hated it. But, it's like, no, because I'll tell you, that'll get away from you in 2 seconds. I mean, you
Yeah.
take your eye off that ball for 2 seconds, and I promise you there's going to be massive gaps and money missing or unaccounted for, or just spending on things you don't need. And so that's, another entrepreneur had told me early in his career. He was like, he said, mind the nickels, mind the dimes, something like that, and the dollars take care of themselves. That was always my big thing, is if I could just pay particular attention to knowing every single outflow and inflow, by the end of the month, we should maintain profitability, like good
Yeah.
profitability. And even
Yeah.
if we didn't, I knew exactly why and where. And yeah, we were extremely profitable. We never had a single month we weren't, like deep into profitability. So we were very profitable all along. I never wanted to raise capital. I never wanted to bring in any finance partners in. And so I didn't have to, because we grew organically and profitably so well.
Reminds me of the saying, what gets monitored gets managed.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. That's a great way to look at it. A great way to look at it. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I just, obviously being in data, I created all these different models and
I
just
can
different
imagine.
elastic metrics around all the different financial KPIs and
Yeah.
this and that. And I mean, I could talk for a day about all the different things I
Yeah.
pulled out of that, but that's one of the other things I obsess about, is the ability to help businesses understand all of their expenditures and efficiencies, and where there's optimizations for growth, and candidly, how they can oftentimes do a lot with a lot less. That's kind of
Yeah.
the theme of that, to be honest.
That is a superpower. I'm sure for many businesses would benefit from that.
Yep.
So Ned, you had a deeply profitable agency with, it was growing organically, word of mouth. You're putting out an amazing product
Yep.
that is solving great problems, probably undercharging potentially for the value you guys are creating.
Yep.
And yet you sold at the end of 2023. You mentioned that you sold to, was it a PE firm, or did you sell to Power Digital? Or was that the
So
same thing?
it's It's a private equity backed strategic, right? So I mean,
Got
the
it.
sale
Okay.
itself was managed predominantly with the PE firm, of course, but it's I work with the buyer now, which is a larger strategic in the industry.
Yeah. What were some of the things that led to that decision versus just continuing independently?
Yeah, I mean, candidly, I had no intent to sell. I mean, if you go back to just spring of 23, wasn't even on my radar. We were working on a potential deal with another paid media agency where we were going to potentially look at like kind of, combining of forces merger style deal to see if we could combine our EBITDAs and be worth considerably more and then accelerate further. They were pre-click, we were post-click, made a lot of sense. And we were entertaining that, I should say, as an idea. And I got chatting with Todd Taskey, as you know, my banker, right?
Yep.
Obviously, who
Right.
is just tremendous, by the way, as a representative for us, and would strongly recommend anybody interested in a potential acquisition reach out to him. But so
Yep.
I started talking with
Mhm.
Todd, and he really opened the aperture for me to understand what the M&A market looked like out there. I had some ideas in my head in terms of multiples on EBITDA of what we would be worth. He thought I was undershooting it a little bit. It would be higher. Candidly, where they came in was considerably, multiple turns even higher than what he had said. So,
Right.
it was a factor of things, right? I certainly would not, I would certainly not dismiss the fact that some of it's financial motivated. I mean, they came in with I mean, it's life changing, right? When you can sell a
Yeah.
company like that. So obviously that was a big deal. And at the same time, I really wanted to see the model we had built accelerate into the upper echelons of clients, the big logos. And I saw ways that we as a company slash going forward, maybe as a department, could accelerate a lot faster. And that's so far exactly, forget all the compensation bits. That's exactly what's happened. I mean,
Interesting.
we doubled the 12 months after acquisition, right? I mean, we have we have clients working in the Fortune 5 now, right? Not even Fortune 500, Fortune 5. We've got, multi-billion dollar organization clients, right? Where we get a win on a test and it's like 7 million more dollars a year and right, like really
Yeah.
impressive lifts, right?
Right. That's
So
good.
it's
Yeah.
it's fascinating, and my team's gotten tremendous experience. We've grown, and it's kind of just like an accelerant to sharing the gospel. I mean, I really truly believe the elixir to growth for any company or any organization is rapid, empirically backed experimentation. Identifying a metric that matters, determining if that metric is movable, and then running hypothesis backed, thoughtful, empirical
Yeah.
experimentation
Right.
and rinse and repeat.
Sure.
Identify the line in the sand you want to move that metric to, run experiments. Did you get there? No, keep going. Yes, okay, move on to the next metric. And it just keeps going. And to me, that's the elixir to success for any great organization, from a lemonade stand to a government, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
anything in between. And yeah. And so, I really wanted to kind of share that with larger brands. And Power gave me a platform to do that. At the same time, also take my skills as an agency owner and help Power, which is also growing tremendously right now, accelerate. And yeah, it's really been a dream match.
So just to feed that back to you, you were kind of exploring potentially partnering up with another agency, a pre-click agency that led maybe serendipitously to a conversation with Todd Taskey. Todd is obviously a mutual friend. He's been on the podcast. He is a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah,
And he's a great guy. And so that led to, I'm sure, a conversation with the PE firm slash Power Digital, and sure, financial opportunity, which I want to talk about in a second, but also gave you access to bigger logos,
yeah.
which maybe that they currently had as an upsell, across to your service and whatnot. What else have you found as a result of joining I imagine that Power Digital was it larger agency than yours, or was it about the same?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, they were high 600s in employees, right? I want to
Okay.
say when we joined, yeah, because when we combined, we were like high 700s, I think, something
Okay.
like that.
Yeah.
I want to say, and we brought 120 to the table. So
What did you find being a 120 person agency, growing it from sort of bootstrapped all the way up to joining a 600, 700 person agency? Like what are maybe some other benefits that you accrued?
benefits that I accrued specifically. I mean, I went
You
from
or you or your organization.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's you're getting into a far more sophisticated HR program, training program, a personnel development program. You're getting far more robust on your financials. I mean, like some of the folks on our finance department are one of them two of them in particular are like straight from PE, and so I mean really sharp, like really sharp. And so they absolutely understand not only, how we're doing now, but are we on track for our 3-year plan, our 4-year plan? And not just like speaking about that in hyperbolic language. I mean, quite literally, like what metrics and what levers need to be pulled today, this month, and this quarter to keep us on track with that growth. And that's a really interesting way to look at it. I was, a little bit more narrow focused on like this week and next month type of thing. And they're far
Yeah,
more have a broader vision. At the same time, we're aggressive on our M&A strategy within Power as well. And so that's been a master class, candidly, learning on how that works and how we identify opportunistic other groups to potentially acquire and bring into the family here. Certainly not, I didn't have anything. I had never acquired another business within Power, right? So I never had any, I'm sorry, within Endrock. So had never
yeah,
had any of that. And then just, world-class leaders. It's a bigger organization. I mean, some of the folks around me, specifically in the C-suite level, are world-class, really
that's
world-class.
awesome.
They really are. And my team is awesome, et cetera. I trained a lot of folks on my team, and they've been really impressive. And it's been great to just kind of team up with other folks that followed their own path. Some of which were entrepreneurs that sold to Power, other of which were kind of hired in, but nonetheless, all really impressive in their own right.
That's awesome. So I know that Todd talks about this concept of a second bite of the apple.
Yeah,
My understanding is that you chose to roll forward a significant part of your equity in your
yeah,
business
yeah.
into Power Digital. Can you talk about that, what that decision was like and the reasons why you chose that versus more of a cash out type of approach?
Yeah, I mean, mainly, and reason number one is just I really believe in, and thus far the thesis is absolutely happening in Power's growth, right? I mean, Power is a really respected agency, and you can see why if you worked with us for just one day, you'll see why. I mean, the professionalism is really impressive within this organization across all the different verticals. So I wanted to invest into the future growth. I really, really feel strongly about our private equity partner as well, and their vision for the company. And so that was really the primary reason. Second reason to it is I felt it was a great alignment of incentives where it keeps me pushing just as hard as I was as the sole owner. As an example of the agency as now being, I guess one of the owners on the cap table, right? In terms of, it's my single largest investment by a long shot, as you can imagine. It's a pretty hefty 8-figure investment. So, that ability to affect the outcome of that, right, every day is really important for me, right? And it kind of lights a fire under me every day. And then lastly, just a call for what it's worth. The deal was that was offered was structured in a way and was large enough that I didn't need to take more cash than we did, just candidly at the stage of life being at, right? It just
Yeah.
obviously made a massive impact and changed everything. And, it just made a lot of sense, right? I think all incentives were highly aligned there. And Candid Power wanted the same thing. I think they wanted someone who was hungry and willing to roll forward and believe in them and their vision and was
Yep.
willing to
Yep.
put their money where their mouth was. And in this case, literally invest by rolling forward a substantial chunk of that offer, which was, was pretty big. It was about 50%. So
Beautiful. All right. Well, I got two final questions here for you, Ned. So, first one would be, what would be your parting advice when it comes to agency owners who are thinking about selling?
yeah.
What would you say to them?
It's a big question. It's a big consideration to make. The first thing I'd say, and this is not going to probably be new information, is it's all going to come down to who you identify as your partner, whether that's a PE firm that's going to back you as as like the primary platform, or if you're going to be a roll up or a bolt on or whatever it's going to be. Everyone says it, but like the culture of the acquiring organization is everything, because that honeymoon stage is going to end real quick after the acquisition's over, and then it's back to work. And you've got to make sure not only you, but your team is going to vibe and work well with them, or otherwise it's not going to go well for any of you. So that's really the most important. Power and my team have just a tremendous cultural connect, and it was obvious right away, and it still is obvious. Second thing that I would look at is start getting your ducks aligned now, meaning you've got to be wildly transparent. Do not, shade anything, do not hide anything, be ultra high disclosure, because you will shoot yourself in the foot. I mean, the due diligence is like a colonoscopy. I mean, they're going to find, if
Yeah.
there's any skeleton, they're going to find it. And so be very transparent from the get-go and start getting all of your reporting and all of your metrics. As an example, measure every single client you've lost over the years and won, and have an explanation, a paragraph for every single one. Why did you win them? Where did they come from? Who were they referred by? Why did they only last 12 months versus 10, or I'm sorry, versus 24? Why did they last 10 months versus 12? Every employee you acquire, what was the thesis around hiring them, right? Why did they leave if they did leave, right? You need to have all of that buttoned up. Obviously, my financial reporting was really tight. I could explain where every dollar went and why. You want to get on that, because if you can't answer that, that's going to ding you when it comes down to valuations and things like that. And then lastly would just be personal, keep in mind that, like, yeah, these numbers are big, but at the end of the day, you've got to take into consideration, a lot of times people hear about these, big $10 million offers that get thrown out and what have you. And it's like, that's life changing money. It's like, true. Are you the only one on the cap table? If so, it's like, what does your infrastructure look like? Because there's going to be an indemnity holdback. They're going to ask to withhold money from the sale for 1 or 2 years to make sure everything you said was true, right? That might be in the millions. There's going to be likely a net working capital adjustment. These are all things you need to be prepared for. You're going to have to pay bankers. You're going to have to pay lawyers. In our case, we had representation here in the United States and internationally, because we have a lot of international folk on the team. So we had two different law firms that we were racking up charges with, right? And then it's just there's a lot to consider there. So just be really cognizant as to, like, you personally, whoever's watching this, what do you want to exit with? Like, what's good for you and your family? And get realistic about what that number is, because whatever they offer you, it's going to be a fraction of that. They're going to ask you to roll forward. You're going to have earnouts, all these things. So that big number is going to get chopped down, and you'll get it back over time, but you got to make sure you're super clear with that. And last thing I'll say to that is to that point, there was a number of instances throughout my process where there's something happened. I'd be like, what? Like, I didn't know that. And candidly, every time, it was not because they were, PE was trying to get one over on me. It was my ignorance. I just didn't know the process. Now I know it much better. So educate yourself on those things and just be prepared for what reality actually is when you exit a company.
So love all that. Culture stood out to me because I came from an agency, a large agency, where culture was extremely important as well. If you considering being acquired by, let's say, another agency, any tips or ideas beyond the obvious, how to really get a sense of the culture? Like, how do you test for that?
Yeah, I think it starts with whoever their CEO/founder are, right? I mean, as an example, in my process, we had 3 larger agencies that were all bidding for us pretty aggressively. And only one of them, the original founder and chairman, who was at the time leading kind of the M&A process, and their CEO, obviously it's power, right?
Yeah.
Reached out to me and was like, what's your number? Like, let's stay in touch. Let's text. I'm a big golfer. They golf. They were like, did you play this weekend?
Nice.
How'd you shoot? I mean, we just chatted, even to the point where he's like, hey man, I'm curious how you address this. We're running into this challenge over your power. How do you address it? Like, we exchanged ideas, you know what I mean? Became friends, if you will. And so that's where it starts, is founder to founder. How do you all get along, right? Second to that is, I would strongly recommend, is get your leadership team in front of their leadership team. Get some time together. Have them go out for coffee, lunch, dinner, drinks, I don't know, whatever, right? Spend a little time together, fly your team out to them or vice versa, and just see how you all get along, right? This is basic stuff, right? And then start to ask hard questions, right? How do they deal with an upset client? How do they deal with a client who wants to service expand, right? What are the fundamental principles and ethos that they believe in? And you'll be able to pick it up real quickly. Not all that dissimilar to dating, if there's heavy alignment there or not. And just be very cognizant of it, because anywhere there's not alignment is gonna 10x after you join forces. It's going to be a lot more obvious. So
Excellent. It's all super high value. One last question, Ned. What's your motivation?
my motivation, geez, on a professional side, I really, this is going to sound maybe a little arrogant to say, I really think we have the answers. Candidly, brands out there want to scale. They want to scale profitably. They want to win. They want to grow. And we've got the playbook to do it. Obviously, done this on the post-click side. Power's majorly got the playbook to how to do it on the pre-click side. Yeah, that's really it. It's like, I really feel like we have the answers. Brands would be far better off giving even more autonomy in our direction. We've got so many clients, so many success stories, and so much data over the years to see how these brands went from zero to hero, right? Some of them to billions of dollars in acquisition. And we've seen it and been along with a lot of them along the ride. And so it's like, there's a wealth of knowledge here. And so, Yeah, it's I know it sounds a way to say, but like I feel like we really do have the answers. Yeah.
Well, that is awesome. Is it fair to say, considering I'm curious, Ned, you mentioned part of your growth strategy was working with agencies as a bolt-on. Are you still offering that as for agencies as a kind of a bolt-on now that you're with Power Digital, or does that not make sense anymore?
We are. I'll be honest, agencies aren't quite as keen on it now, but we are. We do
Yeah.
have, basically with a couple of them, we've got like these like Chinese wall style agreements that
Yeah.
basically forbid us from bidding any of their clients on
Yep.
services that they offer. Because most of
Yep.
them, to be honest, are like paid media agencies acquisition,
Sure.
right? Or like email or like Amazon maintenance or something like that. So in those cases, yes, we certainly do. It's a little harder for them to get around to it versus when it was just Endrock because we were just CRO, but we certainly
Sure.
still have it. And yeah,
Where can people reach out to you if they want to connect with you, if they have more questions, if they want to just say hello? What's a good place for them to do that?
yeah, I mean, speak true to my word. I live around my inbox. So just ned@powerdigital.com, right? That's an easy one. Or just find me on LinkedIn. That's another one. I'm not really active, to be honest, on any of the other socials. So one of those two is usually best. Or even our website, Endrock's old site or Power Digital site.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining, Ned.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the Deep Specialization podcast. If you haven't checked out my best-selling book, Anyone, Not Everyone, you can download the audiobook for free right now by going to anyoneNotEveryone.com. That's anyoneNotEveryone.com. And finally, a special thank you to our sponsor, E2M. We'll see you in the next episode.